You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.
Welcome back to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast with myself, Wayne Walker. In this episode, I'm speaking with Debs Swann on her recent deployment to Turkey for the earthquake with the UK International Search and Rescue teams. So Debbie is a ACP, so advanced clinical practitioner working in the Cambridge area. She's also a WEM faculty, so World Extreme Medicine faculty and teacher on courses. And she's also a member of UKISAR, so UK International Search and Rescue team. So what I wanted to do in the episode is really just dig into her anecdotal reflections on the recent deployment to Turkey. Just look at some of the challenges, some of the highlights and lowlights, and also some of the team dynamics and or debriefs which occurred, and then just look at a brief cross section of the patient populations you saw. Debs, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to have you on. Debs, I just thought we could just start just by setting the scene, really. So we'll dig into maybe how you got involved with UK International Search and Rescue teams, but just in context, could you just maybe speak to the Turkey deployment, because I think it was maybe a mission like no other. Could you kind of just frame it for listeners as to the context?
It was is the worst natural disaster in modern history in the Northern Hemisphere. It has so far, I think 57,000 plus people have been killed as a result of it across Turkey and Syria. I believe there's over 120,000 people injured. Where we were deployed in Hatay province to Antalya city, which was previously known as Antioch. So it's an ancient city, birth of civilization. 80% of that city has been razed. So a devastating, unusual earthquake, mainly because it was shallow. It's a shallow earthquake. It happened just after 4 a.m. Turkey time. People were in bed. So, most people are in bed. And it shook. Magnitude 7 was the first earthquake at, I think it was 4:17 a.m. And it shook. There was like 100-kilometer break in the earth that shook for 100 seconds. Oh no, it's 400 kilometers, shook for 100 seconds. And then there was a second earthquake of magnitude 7.4 1 p.m. later that day. So fairly devastating earthquake.
So I mean, there's lots to go out there, but just maybe if you could just speak to the cross section of injuries you saw, because speaking to you before now, I understand it wasn't just crush injuries, but there's a lot of hypothermia, a lot of malnutrition from people being trapped. There was maybe obviously fractures and soft tissue injuries, but it wasn't just the crush injuries. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so people, it was cold. So during the day, it would probably reach about 10 degrees. At night, drop down to -5, -6. So people who are trapped, they've got no way of keeping warm. So when we got to people who were trapped, they were primarily dehydrated. We did our first rescue on day 2, and then we had subsequent rescues day 3, and then day 4 going into day 5. So when we got to them, they were dehydrated. They had, fractures, as you said. There's crush injuries. No overt crush syndromes that we came across, but that will certainly be a sequelae of being trapped for so long. And fractures pretty much it was the standard thing, really.
What kind of level of care were you hoping to provide for these patients? Because you're dragging them out of some extremely difficult and challenging environments and or collapsed buildings, collapsed structures. In your mind, was there a pre-brief about sort of level ceilings of care, about what you could aspire to achieve from the scene?
Each situation is different and each deployment is different. Where we were, there was a functioning hospital about 2 kilometers out of Antalya city. So we were fortunate enough that the hospital wasn't badly affected and not too many staff were killed or injured. The Turkish government have a very good disaster emergency plan because they had a pretty devastating earthquake in 1999. So they are prepared for it. So there were staff being brought in from all over Turkey, from unaffected parts of Turkey. So we knew we had a hospital that the locals, the nationals could go to. Our setup with UKISAR is in the base of operations. We do have a small field hospital, but that is for UKISAR staff. On any deployment, our mission is for the nationals that we rescue, they go to local healthcare, or they will go to a set up international field hospital. So other organizations, NGOs and UN based organizations set up. So for us in Turkey, it was pretty much treat in situ whilst they're being dug out. And then we handed over to local ambulance services. And what was unusual was that it was so noisy in the city. You just hear sirens all the time, and you see ambulances just going round and round and round and round. And they're basically got their sirens on, going round and round, waiting to be flagged down to load someone into the ambulance and take to the hospital. So we knew if we get someone out, we know that we can flag down an ambulance, get them into that ambulance, and then they go to the hospital. So from that perspective, that made things a lot easier for us.
On speaking to you, Debs, after the incident, the semblance I got was that it was really visceral, from your perspective. There was a lot of emotions to process. There was also a lot of information and experiences to process. You had a couple of what was perceived to be near-death experiences. Could you speak to those, because they were quite unique in the presentation? I can imagine they completely caught you off guard. Could you maybe unpack those?
Yeah. So you kind of expect you expect that it's going to be dangerous what you do, and you mentally prepare. And I don't know about you, I mentally prepare for lots of things. So I also do FEM with the care team in Birmingham, and you kind of, from your experience as a CCP, you do. I don't know if you did this. I do mental modelling, and I think a lot of people do mental modelling, and in a way, it helped me, for certain situations and potentially predictable situations. And you think you can do some mental modelling for an earthquake? Yeah, you can up to a point, but the actual, like you said, the visceral feelings, you can't prepare for that. I was in a collapsed structure with a guy who had been trapped for 3 days, and he was a rescuer. So the first earthquake struck, and we believe it was his parents he was trying to rescue. And then the second earthquake struck, and he then got trapped by, the floors pancaking and collapsing. And he was trapped under his parents who he was trying to rescue. And when we got to them, his parents were dead and holding hands. And that in itself was, when I saw that, when I crawled into that space, that was, it felt like it was a lifetime. I was just taken aback by it. And the USAR tech, the firefighter, John Aitchison, who I was working with, snapped me out of that and was like, come on, I need you over here for this guy. And that's what I needed. So that in itself, I was kind of already on the back foot. And I think we had been in the confined space, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I don't know the time that we were in there. And there was a huge aftershock. It was a 3.8, I found out later. So 3.8 magnitude aftershock. And it shook the building, and things were falling down around us. And as soon as I felt the beginnings of the rumble of it, our crew leader outside had blown the whistle 3 times, 3 short, sharp blows on the whistle. And that is, you get out now. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you get out now. And in that moment, I thought, oh, if this building collapses, we're dead. John and we'll be dead. And it felt like the building was collapsing. And I remember thinking, it was probably a milliseconds worth of thought, but it felt like a lifetime. I thought, oh, I wonder what it feels like. I wonder if it'll hurt. And that was it. It was such a strange feeling, and almost the feeling of, well, I can't do anything about it. An acceptance, like just in a millisecond, that thought, a really odd experience, really, really strange. I feel like I probably have survivor bias now. It's like, I don't know what, I reckon I could probably take that on. I reckon I could take this on. I'll be fine. I nearly died twice in Turkey, and I didn't, and everything's fine. It's a really odd experience, and I've never had a very near-death experience before, and I'm sure people listening to this who may have experienced the same thing. They may have experienced completely different feelings, but it was almost like a peaceful feeling, really odd.
You also had a different. The second experience was, I believe, someone declared that a dam had broken a little bit further up the sort of valley, and there was a lot of screaming and running, and I think there was sort of this collective fleeing or running. Could you speak to that experience? Because again, that's probably a feeling of impending doom, so to speak, and impending death. What happened there?
We were in a building with two people that were trapped in a hotel, and this was day 4 going into day 5. And you can see this rescue on social media. If you look at Malcolm Russell's Twitter account, it's on there. It was on the news. It was a fairly significant rescue. We were in there. I was helping with digging and going into the confined space and digging out the rubble to get to them. I was coming out because it was our turn to swap teams for doing that. And just as I was coming out of the hotel, or we were coming out of the hotel, the atmosphere around Antalya just felt like the atmosphere had changed. It was heavy. And we could hear people, hundreds of people screaming, and we could see hundreds of people running towards us. And we thought, hang on, what's going on? And then we saw the police in their vehicles speeding down the street and slowing down and telling us to run. And then we saw the military doing the same. And when you see the military running, you just think, okay, it's probably time to go. Don't ask questions, just go. And then one person stopped and said, the dam has burst, the dam has burst. So again, our crew leader, Stevie, again, 3 sharp blows on the whistle, get everyone out. And I thought, it's because we were 5-10 kilometers from the Syrian border. And my first thought was, have Daesh taken an opportunity to take a part of the land that is apparently contested? Has some looting gone wrong and someone's marauding with a gun? Has there been another earthquake that I didn't feel and buildings are collapsing that I hadn't quite noticed? And it was just all of these thoughts again. And everyone just said, run to high ground. So we ran downhill towards the river and then took a right turn to go uphill over rubble to find a building that was still standing, to then get to the top of that building. And it was odd because there was a collective, you could feel the fear, the fear of hundreds of people. It was palpable. And again, it is a situation that I've never been in before. And I thought, if I trip over now, that's me done. And then I thought, if I don't trip over and the water comes, that's also me done. And it was that same feeling of, I wonder if it will hurt. I wonder how long it will take. It was curiosity of what death would feel like. But I was impressed with myself that I was able to run in full PPE, in a respirator, wearing chainsaw boots, and keeping up with firefighters who were like twice the size of me and 100 times fitter than me, running uphill from a fake dam burst. And it turned out that we'd heard that it was a rumour spread for some reason to try and get international teams out of the city, but we never quite found out why. But it did make the news, obviously, in Turkey. And again, it was, as a team, we had a collective experience. And we understand it as a team, and we've spoken about it, and we've laughed about it and laughed at ourselves about it, particularly running downhill towards the river. But yeah, and that was collective, and it was a group experience. And again, really odd feeling.
So I'm gonna come to that actually, because I'd be really interested in the collective experience and just the debrief really, and what was spoken about, what was not, and also just, like you said, how you dealt with it, maybe the camaraderie. But before I just get there, something else which struck me about when I spoke to you earlier, Debs, was around things you just don't think are happening, which is that people that have survived, that are dispossessed of their abode, of their house, are literally, I remember you saying this and me reflecting on this, they're sleeping on the street in -10, -15 degrees on the side of the street because there is no shelter, there's nowhere to go. I mean, that really took me back actually. Did it do the same for you?
Yeah. And I could understand why, because they have had a traumatic experience. They've seen their homes collapse around them. There were buildings still standing that were probably okay, because if they had survived to big earthquakes and subsequent aftershocks, they were unlikely to fall down. I'm not a structural engineer, by the way, so I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't quote me on that. But they wouldn't go into those buildings, and it's understandable. So they were living on the streets in communities. And what struck me and the rest of the team was the generosity of these people. They were offering us tea. They were making tea. They offered us tea. They had piles of Turkish delight. They were offering us food, Turkish delight, food that they'd made, and thanking us for being there. And you just think, you've just had the worst experience of your life. You have nothing, but you're offering us food and tea and to sit around the fire to get warm. And that in itself would, quite a few of the guys were like, oh, what a acute attack of hay fever here, Deb, like they're getting a bit teared up by it. But yeah, it really gets to you. Like, it really gets to your heart when people, when they were just offering us the last things that they had, and so grateful that we were there.
So, talking about sort of visceral emotion and the experience, the shared experience, I think probably a lot of it is in the nonverbal glare or eye contact, and just there can be a lot said without saying anything, I think, within teams, just to that immersive experience. And like you said, some of the visceral experiences you had, a mother and father, deceased mother and father, holding hands, with the son trapped, lots of these kind of visceral experiences. Could you speak to A, how you processed them, and B, what the debrief looked like?
I haven't processed it yet. I'm starting to realize now what we did. I feel okay about it. I wasn't okay when I got back, like the 2 weeks after, really tearful, and really tearful, couldn't concentrate, but knew that was okay. It's a natural reaction to a fairly traumatic experience. And I was in contact with the team that I was allocated to as the medic. So the 4 teams, we split into 4 teams and had different sectors to search. And we check up on each other and we see how we're doing. And that's great. We kind of keep in touch with each other. And it's really nice because quite a lot of the guys, and when I say guys, I mean the girls, the boys, girls, quite a lot of the guys have said, they're having strange dreams, they can't concentrate, they're, all of this stuff. And people are quite open about it. And that's great. That I think we're now in a time where we can discuss our feelings a bit more, and not have the stiff upper lip and then just go into some crazy breakdown. So yeah, I haven't processed it all, but I'm okay with that, because I know little dribs and drabs it's coming through. But yeah, the debriefs, we'd have hot debriefs. We had in our teams, we had the offer of trim. So there were some trim practitioners on deployment, and they basically said, we will be at a certain location, the base of operations, between this time and this time. We'll just be there. If you want to come and see us, then you can, but there's no pressure. So yeah, so there's formal debriefs, and then there's the debrief that we do, with the people that we get on with the most, with the best, I think. So yeah.
Could you speak to the adjunctive help you had? Because so there's lots of moving parts to this. I mean, one is the fact you were working with other teams, international teams and indigenous teams. Another is the fact you had search dogs, which were probably not only a fundamental part of the team and morale, but also vital to use sensors, their sensors that human can't sort of sense, the sense of smell, the kinesthetic sense, and just that sixth sense that a dog has. Could you maybe speak to the search and rescue dogs and the dynamic with other teams and how that sort of cohesive joint operation worked?
The international teams that arrived, so we were the second international team to get to Antalya. So the Italians got there an hour or two before us, and then others arrived after us. So we were the first on the ground there. There is a UKISAR coordination cell that the team leaders go to be tasked certain sectors, certain areas, and places where there's good intel, where people are still alive, that we could potentially get out. And you come across other teams, and we work cohesively, and we know most of the UN classified teams because we've done exercises with them, so we've done international exercises with them, so we knew quite a few of them, so that always helps. The dogs help us to do the searches, but they also help us as morale boosters. Really, they need their rest, they need their sleep, and they need, their handlers are very strict. You can't disturb the dog when, if the handler says no, you leave the dog alone. He's like, oh. But yeah, so actually each of the four teams had a search dog. So we always had the dogs, and I don't know, I'm a dog lover, so it's nice to have them there. But the dogs were instrumental in finding people alive. We'd be approached, so we'd be given an area, a sector to search, and understandably, as you're walking to these places, people are stopping us and saying, I can hear someone in there, I can hear scratching, I can hear tapping, whatever it is. So what we would do is put the dog over the building, the live scent dogs, and if they mark and they do a good mark, then okay, we'll stay and we'll find this person. Or if they give not sure, it might be, we'll mark the building for another team to come through, and we'll ask the local people to keep delaminating. So you may have seen on the news, they've got diggers and they're just pulling the building apart from top down. So we tell them to keep doing that, and then either we'll go back or we'll ask another team, international team, to then come along and search the building. But what was interesting about this, because people were like, you've got the dog, but they wanted the dogs all the time to go on the buildings. It was amazing that we needed everyone off the rubble pile because they're live scent dogs. We need everyone off the rubble pile because if there's someone still digging around the back of the building that you can't see, the dog will pick up on that scent and start barking. So then that gives you a false positive. It was amazing so we have interpreters with us, and our interpreters were people who had been affected by the earthquake themselves. They'd lost their homes or they'd had relatives died, and they came to Antalya to interpret for international teams. So the interpreters would ask people to get off the rubble pile and for people to be quiet, and it would just go deathly silent immediately. It was amazing. Every single time without fail. It was happening everywhere across the city. So the dog will go on, and if the dog gives a not sure bark, we'd get another dog to come from the team to confirm for us. So we had quite a few. The dogs were instrumental. We had 8 live rescues, and the dogs helped with 3 other international teams for 3 other rescues. So basically the dogs rescued 11 people, and we couldn't have done it without them. They're absolutely fundamental to the team.
I've never experienced anything like this, Deb. So this is absolutely outside of my comfort zone and experience. But what would the Debs Swann of now say to the Debs Swann of who's on that plane going to Turkey? Is there anything you would look back and either tell your past self just to prepare yourself, and or reflect on because of the experience that's sort of fundamentally changed you for maybe another mission in the future?
I don't think you can prepare anyone for a disaster like that. I don't think you can. You can prepare your training, your muscle memory, your ability to crawl through confined spaces, to climb things. You can prepare by being fit enough and strong enough to do the job. I don't think you can prepare for what you see, what you feel, what you smell, what you hear. That you can't prepare for that. So I don't think I would be. Would I say anything? I don't know. I probably actually you can do this, and you can do it. And for future missions, put me down first on the list. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
That's powerful when you say that. It's powerful because, like you said, it was probably the worst experience of your life, but understandably the best, because there are joint areas of commiseration and highs and lows, but actually, like you say, fundamentally, you see the best and worst of humanity. You see the pit of suffering, but you also see people without a home giving you coffee, giving you Turkish delight, coming together as a true community. There's nothing quite like that, actually. I certainly haven't experienced that, and it's like you said, it's a shared experience amongst the team. And there's points of like you said, what you believe to be near death, and then maybe, I don't know, laughter 10-15 minutes later, thinking, what was all that about? And you ran downhill to the river. You think, what's about? But just roller coaster.
Absolute roller coaster. And one that I would go on that roller coaster again. I definitely would. I don't know if there was anything. Has it changed me? It has, but I don't know how it's changed me. I don't know how it's changed me, but I know it has. I think I suppose in a way it has changed me, because it's made me think, actually, there are other things that I've been meaning to do for a long time. And now I think, you know what, you need to get on with it. You actually do need to get on with it. And I know, when you work in emergency medicine like me and FEM, you see people's lives are just cut short, or, unexpected things happen. And you know that, and life is short. But I think when you have a near-death experience times 2, I think, actually, no, it really is quite short, isn't it? I actually do need to get on and do the things that I've been meaning to do. And I'm not talking about paint around, like a windowsill, or, that I've been looking at for the last 2 years. Like, proper decent stuff that I've been meaning to do for a long time. I know that it's changed me that way, but I don't know. We'll see what the next 6 months, 12 months brings in terms of how I process the deployment.
So as we sort of finish off, Debs, and just coming to land on the conversation, I suppose the adjoining question was was going to be, what are you going to bring back to, because you are a FEM practitioner, you do a significant amount of pre-hospital care, which is again a very different beast within the UK. It's maybe it's a single patient on the most. It's a team which have kind of have a semblance of what they're going to experience that day on the most. Is there anything you'll bring back with you into practice, albeit to benefit the team, or indeed benefit patients, or that might bolster your FEM practice?
In Turkey, because the situation was so unique, we were doing things. I'm not like talking about medical things. We were doing things that you wouldn't do in the UK, like going into a structure that is unstable and is still moving about. you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't send people in to something like that until you know that it's properly shored and safe to do. So there was lots of risk taking, fairly rapid decision making as well, I think, which it helps with FEM, but sometimes you can perhaps make rapid decisions that you haven't thought through enough. I don't know if there is anything that I have brought back from that in terms of how I practice clinically, because it was so unique. I certainly wouldn't be doing what I did in Turkey in the UK because I wouldn't be allowed to. No, I don't know. I don't think so. No, maybe there is, but like I said, I haven't quite processed it all. I think I'm just glad that I came back in one piece.
I think that's enough, Debs. Sometimes I spoke to you before and you were saying it's actually okay to not be okay and to still be processing it, but it's, we spoke offline around sort of celebrating the small wins as well as the big, and being okay with not being okay, but also with just being understanding it was a visceral experience, but that is unlike any other. But just get from a meta disaster, celebrating small wins in that disaster would and I found that quite profound, because there is still small wins to be had on a daily and hourly basis.
Yeah, there is. I think I was just thinking, I found it difficult to go back to work for quite a few shifts because I had seen some of the worst things that can happen to people. And then you go and you're working in ambulatory majors. You're seeing patients that you just think, oh, come on, you don't even need to go to the pharmacist for this. Do you know what I mean? And it's really difficult. And going back to a place of work where nobody has done what I've done. I didn't deploy with anyone. Nobody's in the fire service. And people are like, oh, how are you? Where have you been? I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. It's like, and it was a bit like, oh my God, why doesn't anyone understand what I've been through? Why doesn't anyone understand? And then someone said to me, well, they don't understand because they've not experienced it, and it's no fault of their own. And it's like, absolutely, it is nobody's fault that I went to Turkey and I experienced those things, that I willingly went. I'm not expecting a bronze statue of me outside the department by any stretch of the imagination, but I think when I got back, I was a bit like, oh, right then, I'll see the next chest pain on the list then. Okay, thanks.
Debs, listen, thank you for these reflections. I think they are both insightful and really just help bring others along on that journey. And it's really nice just to see a descriptive reflection of so many experiences in such short space of time. So thank you for your time now in just reflecting with me, and indeed just giving us a semblance of your lessons that you learned, but also the experiences you had. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.